We're live from the crime scene. What's everybody want to talk about today? Other than I've got an awesome mug. It's got death on it, which is totally...
Oh, I should switch to one of my more awesome mugs. But then you would have to edit it out and post.
Yeah, that's not awesome. So, Nikki, you wanted to talk about the color refactoring thing that you...
Yeah, I could do that.
Why don't you cue that up? Potter, Chuck, you guys got anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was gonna. I worked a lot on the WCFactory this week, so I was gonna share some of my explorations into that briefly.
I think I just was working on the theme a little bit, fleshing out some more styling and, learning where everything's at so I can walk through a little bit of that.
Yeah, that'd be good too. And then I added support for fields this week. And last night I got a custom theme development workflow that doesn't involve compiling. So you can only make simplistic themes with that approach at the moment, but I'd like to get feedback from the three of you for sure. Take it away, Nikki, with your awesome thing here.
All right, so what I have is the refactor of simple colors. And part of that involves some of the variable naming was a little bit more confusing. And I went back and thought about what it is that we were trying to do with the simple colors. And that's basically to be able to have a dark mode for things that switch. And also to be able to have an accent color that switches based on a property. And so if that's all I needed, plus maybe a fixed mode where the color doesn't switch. I didn't need to have default light and dark. What I really needed was like a default mode and a fixed mode in the variable system. And so on top of that, I also, as I'm doing this pattern library stuff, I wanted to have a better system to show the swatches of all of the colors within simple colors. So here are all the colors. And as part of the refactor, if you click on a color now, what you'll get is a pop-up with all of the information on how this variable naming works. So you can see that when I pick this particular red, it tells you what the default variable name is, and that's the one that has a dark mode. And it'll show you what the inverted version of that color is. Let me get a color that's a little more obvious. There. So here's the name for that one. It's red 10, and it looks like this in default mode. In dark mode, it inverts itself. And then if you don't want it to invert, you just use the word fixed now. And that means that it doesn't matter if it's in dark mode or not, that color is going to stay the same. We also have those classes that could be used on an element because a long time ago, Brian wanted classes. And so it shows you, well, here's what those classes would do. So if you don't want to hard code CSS variables and you just want to work in classes, this regular class changes the background color, the fixed class, keeps it not flipped. It shows you, you can also have a class for text color or a class for border color. And then the best part is at the bottom of this, what I have is it will also tell you what the WCAG 2.0 AA contrasting color variable names are. Regular text versus large text. Large text is defined as anything that's bold and 14 point or higher, or not bold and 18 point or higher. And so if you pick a color, it will tell you now, here are all the things that you could contrast with it and be accessible, which was the whole point. Beyond being able to flip things to a dark mode, the whole point of simple colors was the idea that it didn't matter which color you switch to for your accent color, that you would be able to still get accessible color contrast. And so that's what this is trying to give you, is here are all the things that would contrast with that.
Is this published anywhere?
So that is the fun part that I need help on is Storybook is giving me issues currently. And I think it was because I pulled out that, made that Storybook helper set of utilities, and it doesn't like that it lives in a different directory from story.js. So I do want to get this up. I might need some help in troubleshooting this or figuring out a better solution. because I don't want to have all of those functions that I created in the Storybook Utilities folder. I don't want to have to hard code them into every story file, because that just seems like it's going to be a pain if we ever need to update it.
You should have you jumped in the Polymer Slack channel before?
I have not.
You should go in the Polymer Slack channel, and then there's a channel in there that's for OpenWC.
Okay.
They have a ton of stuff around Storybook and have given me a lot of recommendations on things surrounding Storybook and Webpack when I've gotten stuck before, which is
Okay.
every 5 minutes. So
Okay.
I would hit them up. There's people in the Polymer channel are super responsive. So
That is very helpful, because I have a couple of questions related to that, and I felt like between caring for sick child, I was also caring for sick Storybook. So cool. That's basically what I have to show, because that's all I basically did since last week.
Potter, Chuck, you queued up. Oh, by the way, Nikki, that's amazing. So
I know.
just make sure that's out there. It's like exactly the thing that I've always hoped Simple Colors would be.
Yeah, that's an entire project in and of itself.
Yeah, I'm glad you did it in a week. It's helpful.
Okay, so I did some work on WCFactory, trying to get this in a good state before we go to DrupalCon. So if you want to play with this, with the new UI inside of WCFactory, check out the server branch. So all of this whole demo will be on the server branch. Okay, so to make it easier to develop, I put a command inside of WCFactory. It's called yarn run dev:\UI, and that will start up the development commands for UI and the GraphQL backend, because those are two different packages. So this is the current state of it. Looks pretty much the same as last week with slightly less functionality. And that's because I was refactoring it. I am trying to incorporate Apollo, what's it called? Lit Apollo? Yeah. There are some web component elements that I think the Apollo community is putting out for web components. And the reason is because they can get a little verbose if you're just doing them on your own. So if we look inside of factory, I think this is still legacy. So this is an example of a component that has to take care of fetching information from a GraphQL backend just using the client object directly. And basically what's happening is you end up creating a ton of these local variables yourself. So all of these local variables that you have to receive from the GraphQL backend and then reflect those into your local variables. It's totally doable. There's nothing wrong with it. It just gets a little verbose and unreadable. So in contrast to that, here's an example using lit Apollo. So they have Apollo query, they have Apollo mutation, and they have a few other base classes that they want you to extend from. So if you need to fetch data from a GraphQL backend, you would use Apollo query. And you supply it two things. You would supply it the client, which is just like a one-time setup that you pass to all of your elements so that it can connect to your GraphQL backend. And then you send it a query. And the query that I'm using is get operations. So I'm going to get a list of all of the active operations. And an operation is whenever you click a script, it runs on the back end and it stores that. So you get a list of running operations. And so it's going to get a list of operations It's going to give you access to data, to an error state, to a loading state, a few other states that you can just access really easily. And you can start doing your component based architecture. So whenever the data comes back, I'm going to loop over all of the operations, and for each operation, I'm going to display it as like an active script, as these are your active scripts that are currently running. So on the front end, what that looks like is this is the component that we're currently looking at, this active scripts. It's coming from this component. So if I click watch, it should update active scripts. So there you go. So as I start these operations, that query will get updated. So I like the way that they handle this. You don't have to use lit with lit Apollo. They have some other implementations. They expose like a few mix-ins that you can bring into Polymer or Vanilla Web Component. But the lit implementation is the most out of the box that they have, and it's pretty nice. So I will say that Apollo is really powerful and cool, but it's a lot more confusing than something like MobX, because with MobX, not only do you have to worry, so MobX is just the state, and that's it. Where Apollo is the state with a bunch of caching methodologies built in so that you're not crushing your server every time you want to update the state. So it tries to be smarter. And so the trade-off is it can be slightly more confusing. So to illustrate that, let's look at, so the concept of whenever I click this button, it's going to, that's a mutate operation. So I want to run this script. And so the mutate operation will go to the back end, run the script, and then return a new operation saying, here's the new operation that you created. Now, you would really like that to be automatic, to where it brings back this new operation and then it just updates the local state for you, right? It's difficult to manage that. Like, it's difficult for Apollo to just inherently know where this object should be in the cache, because this cache, or the local store, I'm sorry, because the local store is categorized by calls to the back end. So it's a really hard concept to understand. But basically what that means is if I click this button and I get a new object and this doesn't update automatically, it means that you need to manually connect these two states together. You need to manually say, this new object that's coming from this mutation is directly involved in these get operations script.
So it's like the opposite of MobX, where it's automatically assuming everything's stitched together by default.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. And again, that's just because they're trying to be smarter with the amount of network requests. So what that looks like
probably helps for security too, I would think. You're being more intentional about what is manipulating when.
Right. Yeah. So basically what that looks like is this little piece of code. So here's an Apollo mutation. It's similar to a query where I'm giving it this mutation that's going to run this script. I'm going to give it the script name and the script location. It's going to run the script and return a new operation with its ID, location, what element it's associated with. And in this render function, I provide the client, I provide the mutation, and I provide the variables that are specified for this mutation to run. And then I can tap into on update. And on update is a hook that you can jump in and say, whenever something is returned from this mutation, I want to get what was returned, in this case, run script, and and it also gives you access to the store. So what I can do is say, I have this get operations query that my other components are using to get their operations. Load that query up, give me the result of it, and I'm going to manually push this run script that was just returned from the server into that cache array. And then I'm going to write it back to the store here. And that's how, whenever I click this watch, it automatically pops into this script up here. So it's a little frustrating at times, but there's also different strategies for how, like, how you do that. There's different ways to even accomplish this. So it's not as easy as MobX, basically, but it's still powerful. So
Cool.
So when are you going to merge that in? Do you think it's anywhere near that point?
I need to put. That's a good question. I would like to. So I have to put the terminal back. You know how I used to have it where you run a script and you can see the terminal output. Mm-hmm. I haven't refactored that yet. What I would like to do is put these, like, put active scripts into almost tabs, like sort of like how VS Code manages it, like open windows, maybe like tabs down here at the bottom that show your active scripts, because you're going to be navigating through a bunch of different elements with a bunch of different operations running. You need to be able to easily find those at any given time. So I need to add that back in.
Is that is that something where this gets plugged into like Electron, and Electron manages that in the UI CRUD, or is this going to be agnostic?
I was hoping to keep it as agnostic as possible, and where Electron, if we do we could augment anything in Electron. So for instance, we could still have tabs in the interface, but then we could also put tabs up here in like the toolbar that Electron provides.
I gotcha.
So
I don't even know that I mean, I think the only advantage to packaging this in Electron might be automating some of this stuff ahead of time for people.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a lot of other agencies on that. Like, I don't know if you can run Docker containers in Electron.
No, you can't.
Well, there you go.
Well, but this does not depend on Docker. This is all node based.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the what we'd need Docker for is if we would put in some kind of database, which right now this doesn't have any database. It's just relying on CLI commands. So
then would you be able to install that stuff at runtime with a packaged app, or is that like it has to exist on the computer ahead of time?
Nope. I think we could package everything into Electron.
Because this has huge implications for the Haxe desktop app.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. The more I do this, the more I can see how making a pure node version of HAXcms could be definitely doable. Which would mean that anybody can download it. So
yeah, and more importantly, it's not something we really need to maintain in the same regard. So keeping it decoupled of Electron logic as much as possible would help us scale.
Yeah.
You're up, Chuck.
Last week, Brian came over and we started working on this again to get it set up on my computer. Well, not even last week, it all blurs together. It was this week, actually, Monday. So we started working on things. One of the things we worked on was the menu up here. We used his menu from the store that was recently created, and kind of repurposed it in here and styled it up to make it look nice. So now when we go through, you can see that we have the active indicator and all that good stuff that he showed us in the last week's video. So that was one of the things we worked on. The other thing that I started working on this week was really just styling out the blog page template. So you can see it looks a lot prettier than it did before. We had, let's see here. Last week, when we were looking at it, we pretty much just spliced this information in. It didn't really have any context, but I really wanted to start templatizing it. So you can, we actually switch to a blog post, it doesn't have the content in it, you can kind of start to see the template flushed out. So you have the sidebars unique to all of them, and this published information in the image, and then a tags field, but I haven't put any of that information in. So now if we look at this, you can see kind of where I'm getting the information at. It's all from the JSON. Some of the new things I did is initially we had put in the header image, we had just the title. So I switched that out with a tagline. And then I also added tags, an array of tags. And the way I ended up getting to those is I placed them there, and then in the blog, the actual blog.js, you can kind of see here, I do this template DOM repeat. So I'm actually looping over each of those items, those tags in this particular case, as a tag, and wrapping it with a link, so that we can later come back and define what that, how that link works with regards to sorting out the taxonomy. So yeah, I mean, that's what I've been working on so far. Just moving content back and forth, trying to just flush it out to make it look like a site, and get things kind of in place so that we can come back, like you said, Brian, and refactor some of it to be more efficient. And then we'll be on our way to a really nice theme, I'm hoping.
Okay, so I've worked on a couple things this week worth showing off. So this is a horrendous designed theme. That's kind of the point.
It took you all week to do that?
It took me all week to do this broken thing. So what's important about this horrendous designed thing, or poorly designed thing, I should say, is it is being built dynamically from a theme.css and a theme.html file. So if I delete this file, and I think it's the right file, let me make sure, yep, hit save. Oops. Of course, Nginx goes, no, I still know it's there because I love Nginx, like literally all the time. There we go, so now it's gone. If I take this file and then we delete some of this stuff in it, and we just leave the word active title there. Hey, thank you, Nginx, for actually responding. So this is updating. Let me find it here. So this is in sites test, theme, these two files. So if you update the CSS, I'm having an issue where it's only sort of applying. You can see it sort of applying, where if I get rid of it, it will, if I get rid of it, and then if Nginx isn't mad, there we go, stupid Nginx, then you'll see this hideous red background. It's almost like I'm leaving that in there on purpose to just like make people angry. But you'll see all the state works with those things being loaded in. It's also applying the template stamping logic, just like you'd get from a normal theme. So that's the word home updating, because in theme.html, we've got brackets active title. So this is running off of something that is called custom theme. And so this is what custom theme is currently. And I'm showing you all this because I would love feedback on how we could actually leverage this from a workflow standpoint. Right now, you can't really pull in custom, like I can't pull in JavaScript beyond what's here, at least as far as I can discern. However, this is going to pull in basic template, but not actually invoke basic template. So it's creating the hooking up theme wiring. Basic template is then just going to give me the references to all the common UI pattern elements at the moment. We could obviously dynamically load them or whatever, but then when it sets up, it gets CSS via async await. So it fetches the theme CSS file. And then this was a fun one. It fires a custom event saying that the template's ready, because you get into these massive timing issues between these async awaits and then the actual template needing to be there. So I get the CSS, then I get the HTML. These events fire. On the constructor, I'm listening for those events, so I listen very early on. And then, I guess I don't really need that, but then the template, to get Polymer to be happy on first paint, technically, it's just an empty slot. So there's at least something. Then template ready fires. It invokes a counter. When it detects it's been run twice, then it creates a template tag and then injects into the template tag Nikki's simple colors as an include. Then it puts the CSS in via template literal. Then it puts the HTML in via template literal. Then it does some magic deep in the Polymer specification here for how that HTML function normally works to get the styles from the code that it sees, apply the styles, empty the slot if there happens to be anything there in the shadow DOM, even though there shouldn't be. Then it does this function, which good luck finding that in the documentation, which is stamp template. So this is the private function that the HTML, when you run up here, HTML like that, it's the private function that is leveraging in order to basically do the variable binding. The reason you have to do that is because I can't just write this. Polymer and this function will throw a syntax error. It'll say that that's not valid. And I believe it's because of XSS sanitization issues. Like, it doesn't want you to be able to just inject any variable. The thing that we don't really ever think about is that when I do this, it's on the fly. Polymer is ensuring that this is safe. And so it really helps with a lot of the security of the entire platform because the value is being passed and then template bind or template literal or whatever you want to call this, template binded in. They're always being sanitized. So you have to work around that. Now, this is a weird edge case for multiple reasons, right? We want a theme developer, someone to be able to just edit a CSS and an HTML file, and then us to stitch them together to make them a theme. I don't know what the implications for this would be out in production. I also don't know that it's really that big a deal because a lot of the issues surrounding XSS assume you have, access to user accounts and data, and we just have a static generated website. So I guess it would be, oh, well, you could intercept that HTML file and put whatever you want in it somehow, but it's on a static site. So I don't actually think this is a concern.
Yeah, I second.
Prove me wrong. So I don't know how we could get JavaScript pulled in this way. I was asking in the Polymer Slack channel about how I could possibly get, this is like a hack of a solution I found that someone else had posted on a Stack Exchange. I can't get it to correctly apply CSS variables, and I've actually been running into a lot of issues around CSS variables with some of the more recent stuff I've been doing. But so before I move on to the CSS variables thing, what do we think of being able to define themes just directly in context? Now, you can't add in other elements, which is obviously a huge issue, but you could at least, we could probably like pick a base template and then just inject those and then let people edit them. I mean, obviously I could just start writing paper buttons and stuff and it would render. So I don't know, thoughts?
Yeah. So this HTML file, are you thinking that this is going to be with every single theme, and this is going to be the start of our theme layer, or layout layer, or it's going to be?
So I was more so thinking this is for very simple types of things. Like this is a very simplistic theme layer. This is just for the like your WordPress theme equivalent, where someone goes into a UI and clicks edit CSS and just like does it live, or HTML in the same way. So I don't know, because it's not, you can't get very sophisticated with it, obviously, if you can't pull in your own custom elements. Like it's highly limiting. So this solves simple use cases. And I'd also like to add into the custom theme, because that's what it's called, the ability to have almost like a toggle button or something where you can just edit the CSS and HTML live if you have, you know, if you're logged into HAXcms locally, which would then just target and update those files, and it would just, you know, bring a VS Code editor instance into the browser, so you could just write stuff. So I don't know how far that could really go, because if you can't pull in other JavaScript assets, it's kind of it's excessively limited.
Like I would think that you wouldn't, that's not where you would pull in your assets though anyway, right?
How so?
Well, you would definitely want to leave that to the highest level of your theme. Like you're always going to have control over the highest level of your theme.
Well, yeah. So like what Chuck's doing is full on custom theme development with complex workflows. And what this is illustrating is like this alternate way of making a just kind of almost like the skins concept, right? Where because the template is abstracted from the design, and the CSS is abstracted. It's almost like a you go on Twitter and you inevitably see people that only know CSS complaining that the whole world requires JavaScript now. Mm-hmm. And then people that think JavaScript is everything, saying CSS people don't need to exist. So this is a way of solving all of these different use cases. Like, do you only know HTML? Okay, well, we can teach you these custom tags. And if you write these custom tags, Cindy, like I always go back to thinking of the way that Cindy handles like the sites at PSU types of things, right? It's like a lot of being able to just kind of skin what's already there as far as CSS and some HTML structure. And that's almost like just a little bit above like a site builder, but it's not full on theme development in the traditional sense. But it's still really important. Mm-hmm. So trying to make a way, and I also think this could be a bridge, because we currently have this issue where it's like, well, how are we going to do custom modular theme building? I mean, like Chuck's working in a vacuum, but we don't have like a great workflow to get from him working in that vacuum to publishing just that theme internal to HAXcms to get it out in the wild. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't replace that for sure, but trying to create lots of different ways to get to the end point here.
Okay.
So if it does the CSS variable updating, then everyone in the universe will be a lot happier.
So if you would put in a script tag, it's not that it's going to get filtered out. It's just not going to execute properly. And whenever I say a script tag, I mean a linking to another JavaScript module. So if I wanted to link to our CDN, like our LRN button that's out on a CDN, I go into this theme.html and I put a script with a source of like Pika package, mm-hmm. LRN button. Are you saying that that's not going to instantiate? No. Okay.
No, it won't work because so let's say we did a dynamic import of the CDN asset. the CDN asset is going to reference copies of Polymer or copies of unknown things, and you'll get the deduping issue where you'll have multiple copies of the same custom element registered.
Right.
Because they're not coming from the same source.
But if, yeah, unless everything pointed to the CDN.
Yeah, I mean,
which
that's,
we don't currently do.
No, and I don't recommend doing that anyway, because so we have to compile for quite a while. We're going to have to compile the ES5. Even in a weird way, you know, I mean, HAXcms doesn't support IE11 because of the decision we made with MobX.
Mm-hmm.
So technically it's like, well, what are we hitting that's ES5? Well, right now HAXcms is kind of wonky in Edge, but it does still work, like, because Edge can process ES6. And so it's more that we're compiling to ES5 to be able to hit those weird versions of Safari, iOS, Firefox, and Edge that can handle ES6 syntax, but couldn't handle the web component spec fully.
Right.
So, I mean, we're still going to need to compile for quite a while. And so if we're compiling, then how do you get an asset that has unresolved paths to match up with everybody else? I don't know. I think the roll-up thing is that was mentioned in Polymer threads is a good potential solution. It's just then, you know, that involves tooling and us focusing on yet another stupid tooling type of a thing. But it's very obvious that JavaScript was intended to be modular, but not really like modular in end product as far as who was assembling it.
Right. Still app centric.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, look at this sweet, this killer app that our team rolled out. It had 100 people and mashed it all together and stuffed it as one static file at the end.
Well, I need to put an app in an app. Oh no.
Yeah. Okay.
iframe.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Use an iframe. Yeah. It's education's answer. So, okay. So, what else? So I mentioned there was a CSS issue with dynamically switching between these things. And you can see it on the new haxtheweb.org. It's new every time I hit publish. So now, obviously, because Snoop Dogg and The Price is Right were needed on haxtheweb.org, we now have a Snoop Dogg and The Price is Right reference. We also have a Zombocom reference if Nikki can find it, if she's mentioned enough. So, so the biggest addition is it says example themes down here. And so if you hit example themes, it's like, hey, this is just demonstrating the theme layer. And then there's this part right here. It says bugs. There are known issues that pop up when you swap themes out dynamically in HAXcms. We're working on them, and I point to an issue. So what does that mean? So now nodes in HAXcms can define what the theme is that's active. So what just happened there is that off of the item reference in site.json, it was supplied a theme that it should use. So when you go to a new page, if a theme came across in the definition and that's not the current active theme, the theme gets dynamically swapped out. So I can switch back and forth between these. I could go to Minimalist, which is one I've been working with. And then I have some little, you know, documentation, if you will, on the pages. It also sets up in some of them like, hey, by the way, there's nothing you can really do here. So you're going to have to go to a theme that makes more sense. But you can see all the themes that I've made so far. So learn to is this theme itself. You can go to Simple Blog. There we go. So now I'm in Simple Blog, even though I'm in the Haxe website. And now here's that CSS issue I was referring to. Look how ridiculous this arrow is. I don't really know what does that because I'm doing a whole lot of stuff to try and get rid of the, do update styles and to reapply the CSS variables. And there seem to be edge cases where it's like you previously defined a CSS variable and now you aren't defining a CSS variable and it's still keeping the previous definition, I think is what's happening. And that happens a lot with these buttons. See how these are now not positioned in the middle and they were before. But if I refresh this page, they're in the middle. You also may have noticed a state issue there where example themes was ordered at the top of this menu. So that's another thing I have to work out that I've been noticing as part of this.
So is there a possibility of like there might be some functionality where you say nuke all CSS variables that the page knows about.
Yeah, I think that's basically what I have to do. It's weird because when it's what it's doing here is a little absurd, to be quite honest. Like how fast this is absurd. It's actually gutting the entire DOM, and then it's getting a dynamic reference to that theme, and then once it's got the reference, injecting it and basically rebuilding HAXcms every time. So this has been like the ultimate way of testing how sane our state management is, because it's gutting the whole system and putting itself back in, more or less. So slide player was there. So I did some improvements to that. Outline player, drop over, and then dev theme. And then each of these pages has funny things hidden in them for people that actually go to them. No CSS, you get none. Good day, sir. And I need a golden ticket on that page too. And then obviously the thanks MobX kit. So now we support dynamic theme swapping. I made some other interesting elements that are not fully working, but I started putting them in. So there's the print button. And so print steals some ideas that Nikki stole from someone else, and it somewhat works. I think you can see that. So what it's doing is it fetches the page, opens the window like Nikki, your transcripts thing had, and then it is injecting the contents in there. Now, interestingly, you can see the custom element definition is there, and this partial is there. So like it's weird because like the images don't always seem to flow over as far as the state of what that frame is, but yet the custom elements do. And I'm not defining the custom elements in this window, and I think it illustrates there's a whole series of like security flaws in the browser spec associated with target equals blank. So if you open a new window, technically it's got some relation to the parent window that invoked it. And so that's the only thing I can think of as to how this is showing up here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the heck is going on with the images as to why they don't load. I don't know if I have to set like a base path or what.
Have we considered just creating a print theme that links to?
Yeah, you could do that too. That's a good idea.
I feel like that might be a little bit cleaner in that use case. For the transcript, there was, there's not, that one I kind of did just because we're limited in the amount of styling, was just a quick solution. But I think there's a lot of power in a print theme where you could select at what node level you want print. So right from the page, you could print by default that page, but then maybe there's an arrow by that printer where you could set it to print the entire lesson.
It's like you're aware of what's already in the button, Nikki. Stalk on Twitter much? So if I do type equals ancestor, and now I click the button,
now you can print everything.
now it is fetching everything that is within the hierarchy that you're currently in.
Yeah, so,
but yeah, the theme part, I think that would actually solve it. That's a good idea. So I think you voluntold to do it, right?
yeah, you get me started on the where we got stuck with the HAXcms stuff on my screwed up machine, and I'd be happy to help.
So this is now a printout of the entire course. What it's doing is based on the site and based on the button having a type, you can either, the default is just the page you're on, then you can do parent, you can do ancestor, and you can do site. And I'm trying to start to stick to those 4 conventions as far as the names of things. So, there's active, or the page that you're currently on, then parent is the thing just above it and down. And then ancestor is from the active all the way back to when there's no menu, there's nothing above it. So it's that entire branch, if you will, and then just site. And then you can see these weird things, right? So like that image is there, and some of these aren't. And then there were a couple images that were there, like that image isn't there. There was another, oh, there it is, like that GIF is there. So like, I don't entirely know what decision it's making about when to throw stuff over there. But yeah, you're right, Nikki. If there was a print theme, it would totally solve that. instantly. So you're thinking we could just like switch to the print theme and then hit the print button, and then when you close, switch it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would totally work. Because I mean, when I just hit print, it has, you know, the thanks MobX dude there. So then if it just scrubbed off the design and put everything in order, then that would work.
Yeah, or, you know, one of the patterns you see is it opens a new tab with the site in the print theme. And then from there you can print.
So the themes came from somewhere, because I'm really lazy, as we all know. So the theme is there because, let me set this back to, whoops, minimalist. Whoops, stupid Nginx. Ugh. Okay, so this is the minimalist theme. This is a theme that I started working on this week. It's based on this University of Wisconsin OER page. And so this is just a very, right, it's a very minimal design, right? There's just content all in one flow, and then there's links across the top. And so this also provided like a really good use case to start to drive into, like, okay, I need to make a print button. Okay, I need a link to home, and then an option to be able to display it as a link and an icon versus, right? So like it created a lot of really good use cases. I also like this. I made an element that I haven't implemented yet that basically does this. You define the icon and it just toggles between them. It's a simple treatment. So what is going on with this theme is I can now go to site details, and I switched over to the custom theme before, right? So you all saw that, we could do that before. But now the thumbprint is being completely driven by fields, field definitions, and the field data behind the scenes. And Potter shakes his head, and this is the game change. This is like I spiked the football, because now we've got fields that can be defined on the back end. And theme is one of those fields. So when I built the Haxe the Web website, I literally went into the UI and then I said, make that page appear like learn. And now that page is learn. And then when I go to another page, because the definition is not locally presented, it falls back to the theme in question. So that is actually coming from the theme. Whoop, I gotta get rid of that value now. So coming from the theme layer itself. So on the back end of that, what this looks like. So there's PHP is brokering it, and it's basically doing the validation. And it's building a few core fields that basically HAXcms has, right? So unlike WordPress that has too many core fields, and Drupal 7 had a bunch of core fields, our core fields are theme, created date, title, description. I think that might be it to be and the path, which then you can see reflected in the little details button, right? There's title, location, description, which is just it's in the spec for JSON's outline schema. And then on advanced, there's created and theme, right? So every site will now get these 5 definitions, but you may notice there's other ones here. So the other ones are being defined by the site.json itself. So the way that those line up is Bueller, can anyone tell me what this is? Someone from Altoona has written quite a bit of it.
What are we?
So this comes from the back end.
Oh, this is the Haxe wiring.
Boom! More mics drop out of the sky. There's just raining mics down. So the back end serves up Haxe wiring. The front end escalates it into forms. So we've normalized HAXcms and Haxe editors form presentation layer. So now when Nikki makes her table editor and it works for Haxe, we'll automatically have the definition for the field type in HAXcms.
Cool.
But I'm sure the Gutenblock system and Drupal, they'll be able to survive this. So I was able to build out a infinite list of images that can be accepted by any of the other fields like this. And so this is an input method array, which is in the Haxe schema. And then in there's properties for source and alt data. So then what that looks like as implemented in this theme is if I go to a page and I hit details and I click the plus sign here, we get an infinite list of source and alt data, right? And then for source, let me pull up a JPEG. Let me make sure this actually is a JPEG. Okay, yeah, so this is the thing I'm gonna put there. And the alt is gonna be windmills are cool. And then for item 2, we'll make another one. I'm just gonna point to something JPEG. I'm looking for a link. Sure, we'll make it that. Stuff and things. All right, so then I'll hit save. So what just happened is behind the scenes in our site.json, it took that page, what's that? Variables and expressions. And then as the call went to the back end, it now just generated this. So now we have those field definitions saved there. Then back on the front end, it automatically reloaded because this theme that's called Minimalist, probably shouldn't be called Minimalist because it can support fields, but it has, in here, and this is where, Chuck, you'll be super happy. So, all right, so Minimalist template. So I've abstracted the template. I'm abstracting the themes from the templates. So it's a mix-in. And then the Minimalist template can leverage the fields this way. So in any template now, you can do active item fields dot whatever, and you will have the list of sanitized data automatically. So now when I want to put the title or the subtitle in here, I go into here and click subtitle, Chuck will flip, and I hit save. Now I get Chuck will flip in here because the data got refreshed for the active item, the template repaints from the theme, and then Mike's rain down from the sky. So, oh crap, this adorable little text editor can handle highly structured data now.
Stop adding functionality.
Oh my gosh. What does this mean for content modeling?
I don't know. So we've got our forms with, more or less infinite definitions. Then the other thing that I haven't finished yet is this thing. So I made an issue because someone asked how to write Haxe schema to wire up an element. And I pointed them documentation. And then obviously we have to have the coolest documentation site on the planet. So what I was thinking is, what if we had an interactive Haxe schema builder that validated on the fly and then presented you with what it was? Because I think all of us saw the eco-JSON schema form demo where it had the 3 panels. You could update the values in one, update the schema in another, and then you'd get the 2 composited. And I think that's incredibly impactful. That was like, I went partying when I found that. So what this tag is currently doing, which is Haxe schema builder, is it is leveraging the Haxe wiring and then requesting a prototype, because I put a function in a while ago that just serves up like, this is a valid baseline, example. And then it's injecting it here, mirroring it with this JSON field, more or less just to do it at the moment. And then over here, you're getting what the end product is of that. So if I go in through the schema, and then this is, a nice little VS Code instance, so I can collapse some of these. Get quick, okay, I don't want a slot there anymore. And it's not gonna be title, it's gonna be cool stuff, and it's going to be a color picker. And then after the color picker, we're gonna have an icon picker, and we'll call that icon. and I hit configure, and now there's my, there's that. Oh, these have the same property. Whoops, I made it mad. So yeah, you know, I didn't get it fully finished for all y'all. So property, yeah, if you type too fast, it gets ticked off. This is an issue with setting values in VS Code editor on the fly and mirroring them to other places. It's pretty difficult to do, unfortunately. So if I type slower, property, and then hit a button, and then input method is color picker, and then come back to this. Now we have the color picker here. So then when we get, you know, Nikki's table editor, when we get any, you know, n+1 field definition mapped as Haxe wiring, people will be able to build it here. So then what I was thinking is, and I haven't wired these buttons up, but.
And we can put it into WCFactory.
Yes, we put it everywhere. I'm gonna put, when this is working, I'm gonna put it into HAXcms as the field UI. So then you'll open up the site, you'll hit the little gear, and then you'll get something like this, and it'll be like, well, what fields does this site have? And so then you'll be able to just edit it. But what I was thinking is to write this, like, because I don't want people to, you know, have to just write JSON. I could actually serve up Haxe wiring to the element that presents it, and that Haxe wiring I would serve up is an abstraction of Haxe wiring, right?
I was just going to ask about that.
Because there's a limited number of options here, and so, you know, icon isn't even required, like required is there, but input method, right? If you just had like title and input method, and we had something that served up all the valid input methods we support, which I think there's actually code for, so that then when we say, well, table editor is valid or code editor is valid, then you get it. Because I could always go in here and say code editor, I believe, it might be all one word. Hey, now that turned into a code editor.
So I didn't get that. That went over my head. What are you saying?
All right, so this is building a form over here, right?
Yeah.
Based on reading this schema.
Right.
This Haxe wiring schema.
Right.
So there's only a limited number of options as far as how to write this little Haxe schema block.
Okay.
So if we served Haxe schema to another instance of this tag that was an abstraction of Haxe schema, like the schema for the schema,
Okay.
that I could build a form for you where you could type title and it would automatically write, it would data bind from a input form to this little block. And then you hit add to config and it writes it there.
Oh, I see.
And you see it over here.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that you would, and then you basically have a field UI.
Gotcha.
Because then you could move those things up and down. We could bind it to like an ordered list, and you just drag and drop those around. And then it's writing the Haxe schema definition and showing you what you'll get effectively on the fly.
So what I initially thought you meant was, and this might still be doable, is that based on, is that components that you have defined in Haxe bubble up their input methods, and this thing, I guess what I'm saying is we don't have to define an array of input methods, like hard code them, right? We could allow tags to emit their input methods. It might already do this, I'm not sure. So if I download a Vaadin calendar widget that has Haxe schema in it, that defines, this is a new input type method.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That it would show up in that list automatically, I guess is what I'm saying.
That, okay, so here's how the abstraction works currently. I'm not saying that couldn't happen. That would be, I can't think in that level of abstraction.
Yeah, this is multiple levels.
But what's happening with the Haxe schema is we run a function that says convert this property into JSON schema. And so, because Haxe schema is just an abstraction of JSON schema. And so then it steps through, and the critical piece for what you're saying is it gets into a switch statement with input methods. And I have hard coded the relationship so that if you say, hey, be a number, okay, well, we know that has to be input, has to have a value, and the attributes are this. I guess you could bubble something else up. I feel like it's a different word. It's almost like Haxe input schema. Because the other stuff surrounding it is the same. Like if you, so for example, with select list, actually, as part of this, I fixed an issue. We were using drop-down select. That Nikki, did you write drop-down select?
I did.
It was like one of the first ones you made, I think.
Yeah, it was early on. I know that.
And drop-down select there's some silly issue with paper modals where if you use drop-down select, it fires the same event that closes the modal. So Nikki made Simple Picker, not entirely because of that, but Simple Picker is fresh. It doesn't have that event issue. So then for me to switch it out and for all definitions to just work off of the new picker, this abstraction let me just basically say, oh, well, this is Simple Picker, and here's how we bind the options that you had in the abstraction of Haxe schema to JSON schema, leveraging that tag. So I guess you could. It would be hard to do like data manipulation. You'd almost have to have like a callback, because if you see, like select is a good example. Select has to take the data someone put in and then refactor it so that it can be mapped correctly into the picker that Nikki made. But most of them are pretty easy, right? Like, so there's, text area, code editor, text field. There's an alt data one. Color picker. But yeah, you're right. We don't have so you're saying then people could basically define new methods of input?
Yeah. Yeah, like I could see, as you, I'm trying to, if you wanted to do a widget for like focus area, where the focus crop.
Okay, yeah.
That would be an example of like, that's a really weird one.
That is a weird one, yeah. I also wonder how many methodologies of input really exist in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's like, there's map selected area picker.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we made that, then do you need a whole ecosystem of projects surrounding the picking of a point on a map? Like, so who else is making one? Playing devil's advocate here. Like I totally like that's a great idea, having an abstraction to define these things dynamically. It might be harder for us to validate them. There is a bit of a security factor involved in the platform itself, hard coding what the allowed input methodologies are.
Well, yeah, I mean,
as far as data integrity, I should say, not really security, but.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. This is like a very insignificant problem compared to what this solves. So not that it's not a problem.
No, but I mean, the crop area thing is a perfect example. I mean, there's probably at least 20 projects between WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla alone that implement different methodologies for allowing someone to take an image and say crop just this section.
Yeah, because you do, like if I were to recreate the H5P hotspot tool, I would need similar input.
Yeah. So that's all right. That is definitely worth putting in an issue for. I like when you think ahead to when everyone in the world has adopted this platform and they complain that it doesn't have a good image crop tool. That's what I.
Yeah, definitely. No, we're a year out.
So I don't I don't know that anything else happened with these. Oh, I had to drastically refactor the state management of the outline editor for some reason. It stopped working when I switched it over to be operating off MobX. But while I was then handling it, I kind of tweaked some of the UX component of this. So like if I copy and paste these, you see these buttons live at the top. Just some basic stuff. There's absolutely still some like data validation issues surrounding this tool, also surrounding the previous and next page. I don't know if any of you have noticed when you hit previous and next, it doesn't always actually take you to previous and next in a linear sense. It's taking you to the previous and next things in the array. So I did want to ask if any of you have done or know of functions I could run to do a multifaceted sort. Search is rather easy by comparison because you just kind of, hey, find this thing. All right, and now we filtered to one facet. Now find everything in here, and then you're kind of, you know, isolating. But sorting, so like our query engine can do sorting in the site query tag, and the obvious sort is like, well, order everything ascending, but that's not entirely accurate by itself, which is where it leads into issues with this. Is so like you make 10 pages. We spit them into the back end, they get saved as 10 things in a row. You reorder those pages. They're no longer in direct alignment unless you've applied a multifaceted sort that says everything that's parent null, sort it by in order. Okay, then go to this parent. It's almost like a linear structure that mirrors the order of the hierarchy. And while the data does line up that way, which is why you can visually, you know, see it when I switch themes or whatever, so that I can see this data over here, and that is accurate. If I hit Y program and then click back, yeah, see, it didn't jump to the expected page. It jumped to the page that was made in the time that those were put into the array. So it's kind of hard to traverse this direction if you don't actually accurately know what's there. So if any of you have any ideas as to how we could best do that.
So like a possible solution would be every time you save site.json, it makes sure that they're in the correct sorting order.
Yeah, I mean, does anyone know of a code example to do that part?
Right. Well, but here's the thing, like, let's say that we do have this example. So we either can do it at save time or at runtime, right? If you do it at save time, does that, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is we should do whatever makes it easier for Git to manage the changes.
Yes, and that was going to be what I was concerned about. So
okay.
That's why I haven't been doing it at save time, because save time right now is ultra clean when you look at the Git log. But if you look at, yeah, I just don't know how large a structure you could sort in a reasonable amount of time on the front end. So I would want to do performance testing on that. It could also be something where maybe the back end isn't aware of what those thresholds are and says, like, look, for sites that are smaller than 100 pages, you can sort that on the fly. Or maybe it's every time you open up the, well, yeah, okay, I guess this makes, so every time you open up the outline mode and you reorganize things, right? Because when I pop this up, I'm doing like whole site modification. So maybe every time this save execution is fired, that it ensures the backend is in the right order. But then, like, if I come in here and I maybe went to an individual page, I deleted, or I went and added an individual page, that the front end is more so just like verifying it's in the, I don't know.
Whenever you do, whenever you update a title, so this is updating existing item.
Yeah.
Does it update it in place, or does it like, I would probably make the mistake of doing it immutable style, where I remove the first one and then add like the new one instead of updating it.
So,
But that's probably not the best.
so here's the history here. So when I changed
Okay.
that file, right, there's a timestamp. There's my subtitle, Chuck will flip. Now let's go. Now, do you mean just updating the fields or updating the whole listing?
Like, so yeah, if you did that, would it update it in place, or would
Okay,
it
so
add?
let's hit save on those. All right, so I see the changes there. Then the bulk update, oh, that's Adam. There we go. So those two updated, and then it did do some order reorganization, right? So it's still pretty, the git log is pretty readable.
That's awesome.
At the moment. Which I would love to, I did want to ask you if you knew of any way of doing like a git visualization based on log commands. Because I want there to be a way to hit like a history button or something, and be able to just like click forward or backward and watch the content change based on the history.
Yeah.
I think it could help a lot with when we start to get into multi-user types of stuff, right? Like if that data is living in GitLab and you have multiple faculty editing the same site,
Yeah.
to be able to visualize it here and see, oh, Bill updated this then, and Jennifer updated this then, and so that if you run into a merge conflict, you could always roll back.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it would be pretty easy to do. You would just do a git log, which would return you a list of IDs, and you would hook that up to previous next buttons. You hit the previous button, it does a git checkout with that ID in question, and poof, instantly all your content is reverted. Not reverted, but would be reflected in that git checkout ID, that git commit ID. I'm sorry.
Oh, so that, okay, so that would be pulling the entire site back to a certain point in time.
Yeah. And you're talking about just the page?
Well, that's what I was wondering, because I mean, you're way more knowledgeable about this than I am, but I could see wanting to take the entire site time hop style, but I think you'd have a lot more. So the use case I was thinking was initially, it's like, you're on a page, I hit save, oh crap, I wanted to go back. And I don't want to, it's like, do we really need to do all this advanced state management in the page for a lot of these operations, or can that be handled via Git rolling me back?
Yeah, I would say Git. That, yeah. So if we just did the page level, that would be a lot easier. Because you could do a git log, and then there's a flag for a specific page. Return you the entire log list. You click on the commit IDs. Your page is refreshing to show you what the page looked like at that time. And a button that then says, okay, I want to revert back to this point in time. And you click, I think, what do you click? Like cherry pick or something like that. Yeah.
I have an issue for Git history time hop, and then I just tagged you on it because I mean, if you told me the commands that were needed to serve up as endpoints, I could make an endpoint, would serve it up.
Okay.
It's just I don't know what those commands are.
Okay.
You're always the de facto, oh crap, I have a problem with Git, I'm going to ask Mike.
That's scary that I'm that resource for you. But yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
Hey, when people said I was that resource for jQuery, I was terrified, so.
That would be cool.
All right, so anything Anything anybody else has, or anything we're planning on working on next week?
I'm gonna keep picking away at WCFactory, getting that demo looking nice and polished for DrupalCon that's coming up pretty soon.
I'm gonna hammer out that theme, keep working at that, and seeing what new elements I can get incorporated and such.
Cool. I'm also have to work on the presentation that Mike referenced. In fact, I'm gonna go do that now. And then I was gonna work on the schema builder some more so you can get definitions. Oh, I mean, it's not worth showing, but I also have the V1 spec elements mostly working in Elms. So I have to fix some of the apps that we have, but I do have it auto loading the apps like it used to. It's not that the APIs changed of the elements we use, it's that the APIs changed in the elements that we ourselves made for some of them. So like, you know, you click a fly out and there's no content. Well, it's because like me and Nikki messed with what the API was when we changed it over. Some stuff like that. The content player largely works. It looks like garbage, but it largely works. The studio largely seems to load, but I have to go, you know, dig in some more. My only concerns are around, there's some instances where I know I got very lazy and Mike and I got lazy on the studio, and we were just like, just inject it via inner HTML there. Like it came from a sanitized backend, it's safe. And I don't know how that stuff's gonna play as far as like Shadow DOM, because previously it was not Shadow DOM. Some icon names changed. So it really is just like API changes that we ourselves made over the last year, which is to be expected.
I plan on pestering you more about getting the blog, getting my blog set up with my crappy configuration that I have right now. And I'm going to fight with Storybook.
Cool.
Because I want to be able to set up a test instance of the Alley Media Player and have our accessibility consultant friend do one more round of testing on it since we've done some updates, and see if there are any fixes that we have to make to that.
Awesome. Speaking of HAXcms blogs, Katrina Ware, who some of you may know,
Never heard of her.
Successfully post out to GitHub from HAXcms. So now she has a little microsite that's there. Let's skip the part where I helped her get her crappy machine configuration all fixed, and we'll just say, Nikki, why can't you do it?
Yeah. Do you have some lessons learned from that? Because maybe mine.
Oh no, totally. It's just read the docs. What is it?
So you updated the docs based on getting her set up?
I think it's RTFD, or read the manual or whatever it is. No, I didn't update anything. I just followed them.
I followed them too.
Yeah, I think honestly, it looked like you have a different version of Bash from the screenshot you took. And I seem to remember we ran into this issue before in some weird areas. So I'm hoping that's not what it is, but Katrina had a lot of issues around Docker running on her normal account versus admin account, but she had to brew install things on her admin account, but then would have to, so it's just like very.
Oh, I had to do that too. I just didn't bug you until I got past all of that crap.
It makes me wonder, like, are these things ultra complicated to install because of our context where like our machines are admin managed and we have this silly, you know,
everybody's admin managed these days, so
yeah, but I mean, like, if you just download, so like Rick didn't express any of these issues to me. Now he's had other issues for sure, but like he didn't have any issues in getting the thing just up and going. And I'm wondering, like, is this an issue we're going to run into locally a lot just because of the multi-account thing? I'm not super concerned about it because, like, long term, it's just very obvious that that's not the solution long term. Like, that is fine for developers, but you know, we need to have a platform that just sits there that people can access, and it scripts some of that stuff ahead of time.
Yeah.
Keep it on, everybody.